When dealing with a dryer installation in a mobile home equipped with a 30 amps 4-prong 10 American wire gauge receptacle, replacing a 3-prong cord with a 4-prong cord and bonding the equipment grounding conductor to the dryer chassis is a recommended safety measure. This is due to several factors. Firstly, safety is paramount. Bonding the dryer chassis to the ground provides a low impedance path for fault currents. This reduces the risk of electrical shock and fire. Secondly, compliance with code is essential. The National Electrical Code requires that electric dryers be equipped with a 4-prong cord and connected to a 4-prong receptacle. This ensures adherence to safety standards and regulations. Thirdly, ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection is enhanced. The GFCI installed in the circuit breaker panel for the dryer circuit provides additional protection against electrical shock. However, it only detects ground faults in the circuit, not within the appliance itself. Bonding the dryer chassis ensures that any faults within the dryer will be detected and interrupted by the GFCI. Here's a step-by-step procedure to follow. 1. Disconnect power. Turn off the circuit breaker for the dryer. 2. Replace the dryer cord. Remove the existing 3-prong cord and install a new 4-prong cord. 3. Bond the dryer chassis. Use a solid copper wire, 12 American wire gauge or larger, to connect the green grounding screw in the dryer chassis to the green grounding terminal inside the electrical box. 4. Connect to the receptacle. Plug the dryer into the 30 amps 4-prong receptacle. 5. Turn on power. Reset the circuit breaker and turn in the dryer. Remember these additional considerations. Verify that the 30 amp circuit breaker is properly sized for the appliance. Ensure that the mobile home's electrical system is properly grounded. It is important to hire a qualified electrician if one is not comfortable performing electrical work. The importance of proper grounding cannot be overstated when dealing with electrical appliances, especially in a mobile home setting. Grounding provides a safe path for electrical fault currents to return to the source, tripping the circuit breaker and cutting off power to the appliance in the event of a fault. Without proper grounding, these fault currents could flow through a person who comes into contact with the appliance, resulting in a dangerous or even fatal electrical shock. In the case of a dryer, the metal chassis is particularly susceptible to becoming energized in the event of an internal fault. This is because the heating element, motor, and other electrical components are all housed within the metal enclosure. If any of these components were to develop a short circuit, the chassis could become energized with potentially lethal voltage. By bonding the dryer chassis to the ground, you are creating a low impedance path for these fault currents to flow back to the source. This ensures that the circuit breaker will trip quickly, cutting off power to the dryer and preventing the electrical shock. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, is a set of standards and guidelines for the safe installation of electrical wiring and equipment. The NEC is updated every 3 years to reflect the latest advancements in electrical technology and safety practices. The NEC requires that all electrical appliances, including dryers, be properly grounded. This requirement is intended to protect people from electrical shock and fire hazards. In the case of dryers, the NEC specifies that they must be connected to a 4-prong receptacle and that the dryer chassis must be bonded to the ground. This ensures that the dryer is properly grounded and that any fault currents will be safely conducted back to the source. A ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, is a safety device that is designed to protect people from electrical shock. A GFCI works by monitoring the current flowing through a circuit. If the GFCI detects that the current is leaking to ground, it will quickly trip the circuit breaker, cutting off power to the circuit. GFCIs are commonly used in areas where there is a high risk of electrical shock, such as bathrooms, kitchens, and outdoor locations. In the case of dryers, a GFCI can provide additional protection against electrical shock, especially if the dryer is not properly grounded. However, it is important to note that a GFCI will only detect ground faults in the circuit, not within the appliance itself. This is why it is still important to bond the dryer chassis to the ground, even if the circuit is protected by a GFCI. When replacing the dryer cord, it is important to use a cord that is specifically designed for use with dryers. Dryer cords are typically made of heavy-duty wire and are designed to withstand the high temperatures and currents that are associated with dryer operation. It is also important to ensure that the cord is properly sized for the appliance. The cord should be rated for at least 30 amps, which is the standard rating for dryer circuits. When bonding the dryer chassis to the ground, it is important to use a solid copper wire that is 12 American wire gauge or larger. The wire should be securely connected to the green grounding screw on the dryer chassis and to the green grounding terminal inside the electrical box. It is also important to ensure that the wire is not damaged or frayed. When connecting the dryer to the receptacle, it is important to ensure that the prongs on the cord are properly aligned with the slots in the receptacle. The cord should be pushed firmly into the receptacle until it is fully seated. It is also important to ensure that the receptacle is properly wired and that the ground connection is secure. Before turning on the power to the dryer, it is important to double-check all of the connections to ensure that they are tight and secure. It is also important to verify that the circuit breaker is properly sized for the appliance. The circuit breaker should be rated for at least 30 amps, which is the standard rating for dryer circuits. If the circuit breaker is too small, it may trip frequently, which can be a nuisance. If the circuit breaker is too large, it may not trip in the event of a fault, which could lead to a fire. It is also important to ensure that the mobile home's electrical system is properly grounded. The grounding system should be inspected by a qualified electrician on a regular basis to ensure that it is in good working order. If the grounding system is not properly maintained, it could increase the risk of electrical shock and fire. If one is not comfortable performing electrical work, it is important to hire a qualified electrician. Electrical work can be dangerous, and it is important to have the work done by someone who is trained and experienced. A qualified electrician will be able to properly install the dryer cord, bond the dryer chassis to the ground, and ensure that the electrical system is safe and up to code. In addition to the safety benefits, upgrading a dryer with a three-prong cord to a four-prong cord can also improve the performance of the appliance. A properly grounded dryer will typically run more efficiently and will be less likely to experience problems such as overheating and premature failure. This is because the grounding system helps to stabilize the voltage and current flowing through the appliance, which can reduce stress on the electrical components. Upgrading to a four-prong cord is a relatively simple and inexpensive way to improve the safety and performance of your dryer. It is a worthwhile investment that can provide peace of mind and protect your family from electrical hazards. Remember to always disconnect the power before working on any electrical appliance. This is the most important safety precaution that you can take to prevent electrical shock. Always double-check your work to ensure that all connections are tight and secure. If you are unsure about anything, consult a qualified electrician. By following these safety tips, you can safely and effectively upgrade your dryer and protect your family from electrical hazards. Furthermore, understanding the difference between three-prong and four-prong dryer cords is crucial. Older homes often had three-prong receptacles for dryers, where the neutral wire was also used as the grounding conductor. This setup is no longer considered safe and is not permitted by current electrical codes. The four-prong system separates the neutral and ground wires, providing a dedicated path for fault currents to return to the source without energizing the appliance chassis. The fourth prong is specifically for the ground wire, ensuring a safer electrical connection. When converting from a three-prong to a four-prong system, it's important to understand the wiring configuration inside the dryer itself. Typically, there will be a bonding strap connecting the neutral terminal to the dryer chassis. This strap needs to be removed when installing a four-prong cord. The ground wire from the four-prong cord then needs to be connected to the dryer chassis using the grounding screw. This ensures that the chassis is properly grounded and that any fault currents will be safely conducted back to the source. The gauge of the wire used for the dryer cord is also important. For a 30 amp circuit, 10 American wire gauge wire is typically sufficient, but it's always best to check the manufacturer's recommendations and local electrical codes to ensure that you are using the correct size wire. Using undersized wire can lead to overheating and potentially a fire hazard. The type of receptacle used is also critical. An M14-30R receptacle is the standard 4-prong receptacle used for dryers. It's important to ensure that the receptacle is properly installed and wired according to the electrical code. If the receptacle is not properly installed, it could create a dangerous electrical hazard. In addition to the steps mentioned earlier, it's also a good idea to test the GFCI circuit breaker after completing the installation. This can be done by pressing the test button on the circuit breaker. If the circuit breaker trips, it means that the GFCI is working properly. If the circuit breaker doesn't trip, it means that there is a problem with the GFCI and it needs to be replaced. It's also important to periodically inspect the dry cord and receptacle for any signs of damage. Look for cracks, frayed wires, or loose connections. If you notice any damage, it's important to replace the cord or receptacle immediately. Neglecting these issues can lead to a dangerous electrical hazard. Finally, it's worth mentioning that some mobile homes may have different electrical systems than standard homes. It's always best to consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that the dryer is properly installed and grounded according to the specific requirements of the mobile home's electrical system. They can assess the wiring, grounding, and other electrical components to ensure that everything is safe and up to code. Remember, safety should always be the top priority when working with electricity. If you are not comfortable performing the work yourself, don't hesitate to hire a qualified electrician. It's better to be safe than sorry.